But I thought it was a pretty accurate design.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure they take literary license.
I don't know if that was based on a book or anything. I'm not really sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. But that was really big, and I think the interest in the Amish really vamped up after that movie.
Yeah, and that was, what, in the 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you allude in the book that the National Paddler, the, what are they called? The
Tabloid.
National
Tabloid magazine.
Lost that word. The story that Katie was going to sell to him would have been like big news, and that it would be, and of course it would be. Do you think that the interest in real life would be there for a story like that to come out?
I think it probably would have been when I wrote Kingdom Come. I mean, nowadays, that's small potatoes in the current realm
There's
of
too much
scandal.
other stuff going
and,
on.
Yeah. But I think stories of abuse in the Amish community are...
Still would draw headlines?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, maybe not in Trumplandia.
Yeah.
Outside of that,
I did watch a documentary about the Amish. It mostly featured around the Rumspringer, and it was very interesting to see. Do you think they live this idyllic life? They work very hard, and there's abuse. There's all kinds of things that happen in their community. Just they're dealing with stuff just like us. It's just that they're a lot more secretive, and they don't have people to go to as far as...
Yeah, I mean, I think they try to resolve stuff within their own community, and they have their, their council of elders, but, I mean, ultimately, it's a patriarchal society. I think sort of like with, and I don't mean to make too much of the comparison, but sort of like with polygamous cults. I mean, there's going to be abuse when you have a community where, women and girls are relatively powerless. They're supposed to be submissive. They don't talk to outsiders, and the father is the head of everything and the head of the household, and that's of course many, and probably most Amish families are good people, but
right.
that culture allows for systemized abuse, basically.
Right. Well, it didn't seem the way you portrayed it that they were trying to keep any of that type of abuse secret. They did view it as a sin. But if you confessed it and you were forgiven, then that's it. That's the end of it. It was really treated as part of the religion rather than law.
Yeah, and I think, that's the flip side of forgiveness. I mean, we all remember that story when the man shut up the Amish school. And that was such a powerful tragedy. And, one of the beautiful things about that story was that they forgave him. They forgave his wife. They helped his wife and his family get past that. That's a wonderful thing. But the flip side of that kind of forgiveness is I abused this kid. I'm sorry.
Right.
God forgive me. Okay. Well, then you're free to do it again.
Right.
There's no real penalty that would prevent that abuser from continuing.
Right. And of course, no help for the abused.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, it's like the Saudi Arabia, the women, how they're treated over there. I mean, they're raped. They're they get
the sinner,
killed.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, for causing the rape.
Ludicrous.
Absolutely. I guess we're happy to do this.
I really tried to keep a balance in the book. I mean, I think, part of me still finds that culture very appealing aesthetically. I mean, I live in the area, and it's wonderful to ride my bike, and I'll ride bike fields where you've got the guy with his little son on the back of the wagon and barefoot, with the plow.
And
it's just like,
thing.
Oh, Sadie sounds like the cutest little girl.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, it is very romantic in a way. So I didn't, and my goal with the book was not to sugarcoat the Amish and not to have it be all, like we said, Miriam gets blessed kind of book where it's all just about the godliness and the wonderfulness of the culture. But on the other hand, I didn't want to, my goal was not to just trash them either and say it's all evil.
I think you
because
have a great balance.
it's there are plenty of good people in the book as well. But, there is the potential there for abuse.
Well, I thought it was great because even though it was a mystery, there was some humor in there, like with Force and Eli. And another thing that we were commenting on the way up here was This is another book that would have done well with a recipe section. We were getting hungry reading.
Oh yes, the blueberry jam.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Fresh bread, cream butter.
And of course, we automatically fell in love with Ezra. Who wouldn't? You know?
Oh, he's great. I wish he existed.
we were driving by, and there was actually some mules in a field, and we were like, "Is Ezra out there?"
I just laughed when I came across the quote from Elizabeth when the first time that Ezra comes over to her house, and they're both kind of like a little standoffish but attracted, and she said, "Well, I want to be professional," and then she said, "But I shut that bitch down." I had to laugh.
Yeah, there were a couple of moments in the book that were just laughable, but it was such a good mystery. We were talking beforehand about how I don't think anybody would say that Miriam had killed. It was just so well played. I was so shocked.
Good. Yeah. You hope to get those moments of those sort of twists, but it has to work too. It has to be real. It has to feel like
it was very
legitimate
real
and not just random. You don't want it to be just random.
You could see it was a moment of passion, and she just reacted.
Well, with Katie, right?
Yeah.
But then she was very deliberate.
Oh no, very deliberate
about Jessica,
yes.
and then of course with Elizabeth at the end.
Now I'm curious because I tried to look this up. Her body washed up on an island. Is that a real island?
Yeah.
I found it.
Oh, you did? I looked, and
as a
I
matter of
couldn't
fact, I drove past it when we were going to Sue's last week.
Okay.
Well, I have never been there. I just looked on a map. Like I looked at where that brook came out into the Susquehanna and
I
downstream.
tried to follow it,
trying
yeah.
to figure out where she might wash up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we have a dam that that goes across the Conowingo Dam I said it's got to be that island right out there.
It's right off of Port Deposit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I had driven through Port Deposit last week. That was the island out there. Yeah.
Well, I think that brings us to the end, and we thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. This is our first in-person interview,
Oh, cool.
And I think it went very well.
Yeah, it's fun. It was nice to sit down
with
and
the
chat
nice
in person.
background
Yes.
noises.
We're looking forward to reading In the Land of Milk and Honey, the next in the Elizabeth Harris series.
And we're trying to encourage Jane to write more because we really enjoyed these. So, and I think our listeners will enjoy them too. So, we'll.
I'd like to write at least one more Elizabeth Harris mystery.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, thank you, and we'll put all this information on our show notes. So if our listeners want to check you out, they can find it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. My favorite line of Ezra's in the book is when he takes her and drops her off at the farmer's market in his buggy, and he says he'll text her when he comes back. And she says, so you're going to text me from outside saying you're with the horse and buggy? And he's like, not at all. It's a mule.
Yeah. That was very funny.
Yes.
Very funny.
I really liked Ezra's sense of humor.
He
Because he was
has
so
a
dry,
very dry.
very dry. But and when he delivered, it was perfect. You did. Oh, it was perfect.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. We definitely did. And so now it's time for us to give our impressions of Kingdom Come. We'll start with a synopsis.
In Kingdom Come, the first in a new mystery series from Jane Jensen, an ex-NYPD detective seeks escape in Amish country and finds darkness instead. When a beautiful, scantily clad English girl is found dead in the barn of a prominent Amish family, Detective Elizabeth Harris knows she's uncovered an evil that could shatter the peace of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Even though Elizabeth's boss is convinced this was the work of an English, as outsiders are called, Elizabeth isn't so sure. Now Elizabeth must track down a killer with deep ties to a community that always protects its own, no matter how deadly the cost.
Okay.
All right.
We'll do what we always do. We'll give you the main cast of characters.
All right. Our cast of characters. We have Elizabeth Harris. She's a detective with the Lancaster Police Department in Pennsylvania. She moved back to Lancaster after her husband was murdered in New York City. She grew up in Quarryville, Pennsylvania. We're very familiar with Quarryville.
It's not very far from us. Then we have Amos Miller. He's an Amish farmer, and he owns a farm where the first body was found.
Mike Grady is a detective lieutenant with the Lancaster Police. He heads the Violent Crime Department, and he is Elizabeth's boss.
We have Ezra Baylor. He's an Amish farmer, a widower. He raises mules. He has not been attending church meetings, and he's been struggling with his faith since his wife's death.
Then we have Martha Baylor. She's an Amish woman. She's not married, and she lives with her brother Ezra.
Jessica Travis is an English girl. Her body was found in Amos Miller's barn. She has been asphyxiated and hit with a heavy object on her head.
Aaron Lapp is the Amish deacon. He's very judgmental and critical of people who do not follow his edict.
Then we have Miriam Lapp. She's an Amish woman, and she's wife of Deacon Lapp.
Larry Wanamaker is a driver for the local dairy. He travels to all the Amish farms to collect milk.
Then we have Katie Yoder. She's an Amish girl. She's been missing since October. Jessica Travis filed a missing persons report on her, but her parents say she was planning to leave and left on her own. And that's our cast of characters.
Well, I have to say that it was very interesting to read a book about areas that we know so well. Living in Maryland, we're only about 25 miles away from when you're in the thick of Amish country. And we travel up there quite a bit and see them in their buggies and see them in the stores with their children. And it's really quite something.
They're quite interesting people, even though they really don't want to have much to do with us.
Absolutely.
We're English. So what did you think of the book?
I really enjoyed it. I don't know a whole lot about the Amish lifestyle other than that they don't use modern means as far as electricity and vehicles. But from what I understand, and especially after speaking with Jane, that some of that is changing, that a lot of them have cell phones now.
I was interested to read in the story, they all had cell phones, so that's a big part of the story.
And I thought the murder was a well thought out, and I think almost everybody was shocked at the end of who actually did the murder. You had a lot of ideas, but Jane did an excellent job of the ending. And speaking of that, I hope you read the book, because during this review, you will find out who the guilty party is. So what did you think?
I enjoyed the book. It was very interesting. The storyline was excellently done. I've read a lot of books about the Amish people, so I know a little bit more maybe than you do. But I don't know any Amish personally.
Well, they don't want you to know
them. They don't want you to really mix with them. But I found it very enlightening that their methods of taking care of things that need taking care of get done.
That was part of the interesting part, is the fact that Katie was missing,
but nobody was looking for her, or as far as the police were not informed that she was missing because they want to take care of things themselves.
But they also assumed